Good afternoon. Welcome to the Binary Business Show. I'm your host, Logan Edmonds, CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions, also known on various social media platforms as the Cyber Risk Guy. I am joined today by Jesse. Jesse, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Hey everyone, well, thank you for having me, Logan. I'm super excited to be here. I'm Jesse Miller. I'm founder of Power PSA Consulting. I'm a former MSP CISO who now owns a consultancy that helps MSPs scale their security programs and do it profitably.
Awesome. We like having compliance people on the show. I think you're technically our third CISO in our short run on the show now. So always good to get that take on sort of the world of governance and compliance when we deal with these kind of topics. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, the Binary Business Show is all about the world of technology, about the world of cybersecurity, and the world about life and where those places intersect. We live in a world where the digital and the physical are ever increasingly, the lines between the two are blurred, and one directly impacts the other constantly. So we like to talk about the stuff that's going on in the world and how it might impact you as the normal person living your daily life. Um, so Jesse, first off, before I regularly get started, we're in this weird state now. Like I like to call this the holiday purgatory because we're after Thanksgiving, right? But there's a slew of holidays, like 2.5 weeks now. At the time of recording, this is the Tuesday following Thanksgiving. Are you actually going to get anything done in the next couple of weeks?
Oh, I plan on it. we'll see. We'll see how much that actually materializes. So what do they say? Man plans and God laughs, right? So that's
I
kind of where
love
we're
this.
at.
You can always tell who the founders and CEOs are on this call. Like, yeah, I'm going to hit these 2 weeks running. And everybody else is like, no, no.
Yeah.
Oh man, I try. I try. I find that the first 2 weeks of December, everybody's mad busy
Yeah.
because they know they're just not going to be around for the second 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like a 2 week window to actually get stuff done. That's been my take. Would you agree
Yeah.
with that, or is it different for you?
No, I agree, and that's kind of my take. Is you got to hit it hard for these 2 weeks, and I take the week of Christmas and New Year's off every year, so that's kind of my Zen time. I hang out with the family. We don't go anywhere, and so that's my time to relax and kind of recharge. And it seems that you always get some serendipity and some good ideas for 2024 when that happens. So yeah, I agree. I think you just kind of run until these last 2 weeks, and then you kind of have a nice little lull before the new year begins.
So, on that note, let's dive in. You know how it's funny with technology news? It's very rarely positive on its surface. Like, we're just very, the tech sphere, like the tech space, has a running theme of a little bit nihilism and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like it's a constant race to the bottom. It feels like, and this article sort of highlights sort of this. So I found this article before I sent it over to you, literally because I'm on a bunch of forums with a bunch of very salty IT guys, and I have not seen such vigor or rage in quite some time as this article caused. So let me go ahead and share my screen here real quick. This is from bleepingcomputer.com, and the headline is Google Drive users angry over losing months of stored data.
Yeah.
Um, that subject line pretty much tells you what today's show is going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
um, so first off, when I assume, have you worked in IT before? I know you did CISO for an MSP. Did you make a career ever doing IT engineering before that?
Yeah, so that's where I came from actually. So I was a telecom engineer for the first 8 years of my career. Worked in large scale carrier telco operations, and then went over to MSP as a routing and switching guy engineer. So did that for a long period of time.
Perfect. So you've heard the old adage, RAID is not a backup, right?
That's right.
I
Yes.
feel like the 2023 equivalent is Google Drive, OneDrive is not a backup by itself. Like that, really, we need to shift that a little bit.
Well, it's really interesting because it's the curse of knowledge.
Yeah,
We would always talk to our clients, and I'm sure you have this experience where when we sell cloud services, we have that kind of have to take that educational barrier down and say, well, just because you're going to cloud, this isn't a backup. You need a third party backup. It's the trust but verify. And so, similarly to, I think most people think there's some sort of litigation or law in the books that protects their privacy and their data, and there is no such thing. So
no, no.
you're
It's all governed by
responsible.
the terms and conditions. That little box you
Yeah,
check when you sign up for the service, that is all the litigation, law, and terminology that governs your entire relationship with the vendor. And
exactly.
it's the one we, of course, never read. Like I'm going to be honest. Let's be honest here for a second. When's the last time you actually read terms and conditions where you check the box?
No.
Exactly. You're a CISO. I run a
I
cybersecurity company.
I
We're not doing it. Nobody's doing it.
Well, now I do dump them into ChatGPT and say, pretend you're my corporate lawyer. Tell me what I should be concerned about.
Did you read about the court case? I think it was about 4 months ago about the lawyer who had ChatGPT write some of his briefs and like how ridiculous it was. Like on the surface, Legal Eagle. Shout out to Legal Eagle on that YouTube channel. I really like his takes on stuff because for a lawyer, he's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And I say that knowing I had a lawyer on as my last guest last Friday. So please don't judge me, Mr. Attorney, sir. But he gets in there. And he's like, this is just gross negligence. Like ChatGPT is not a lawyer, and
No.
anybody who is an attorney reading this, but I digress. Google Drive losing a backup.
Yeah.
TLDR, users logged into Google Drive, I think it was like a week ago, right? Or
Mhm,
was it a little
mhm.
bit before that? And said, hey, this is the way my Google Drive was in April, May of this year. A good chunk of
Right.
users.
Right.
So they essentially lost about 6 months of data, or 5 to 6 months.
Mhm.
That's what I read. I don't think at the time of writing, Google had recovered it yet. Let me see if that's changed. I don't think they did.
I was looking around a little bit before the show today, and I couldn't find anything saying that they did. And
Yeah.
you'd think they would toot that horn pretty loud if they
Yeah.
did. But
Yeah.
I found this really interesting. This reminded me actually when you sent me this article back in 2012. I don't know if you remember this Wired article where they talked about Spanner in the Google Global Sync database and just the absolute. It was a modern marvel. I remember reading it in 2012. This is 10 years ago at this point, and thinking about like how the type of engineering that it takes to keep global data centers synced down to the millisecond, even better than atomic time, to prevent these types of errors happening. So I would
So
almost say the good news is that it hasn't happened yet, and that's pretty amazing in my opinion.
I think that people sometimes give a lot of crap for Silicon Valley
Mhm.
positions and salaries. There's a reason some of those people make what they do.
Yeah.
They're like one of a dozen people on the planet that can do what they do.
Right.
It's sort of like there's a show I used to watch where it was one of those police procedure dramas. I think it was Blue Bloods, right? And I remember watching an
Mhm.
episode, and it was like, "Hey, our head of counterintelligence might resign. Wow, we can't afford that. There's only 3 people on the planet that can do that job." Right? Like, and
Right.
the other guy works for Secret Service, and the other guy works for the UK. We can't afford that. Like, that is a lot of the case these guys were talking about. Like, there's only a handful of them on the planet that can do that kind of work.
Hmm.
And it's kind of amazing that we basically operate the internet on a handful of very talented individuals.
Yeah, I would encourage people. It's a really interesting read. If you just go look up, I think my what I Google is like Google Time Sync database globally or something like that. And there's a Wired article from 2012 on this. It's super interesting. So if you're a little tech nerd like us, that's what you
I
want to
mean,
look at.
it's kind of crazy too because as an MSP, right? And I'm an MSP I have for a second.
Hmm.
I've had this conversation with customers
Yeah.
that hey, I'm in the cloud. My data, I don't have to worry about anything. Cybersecurity, backups, all that's taken care of me, right?
Right.
No, that's not in the terms and conditions, nor is it what you're paying for.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason if you go to Google, they do offer you a backup. You
Hmm.
pay a separate license fee for that. Like
Right.
I've done that pricing negotiation. If you go to Google right now on the Google
Yeah.
Workspace Enterprise, they will happily offer you a backup
Hmm.
for twice the monthly costs on your license costs.
Right.
Like if you're paying $6 a license per month, now you're going to pay 12. No company's going to leave money on the table when they could charge you extra to do that service.
Well, exactly. And again, it's a heavier load on the compute and everything else. And does it
Mm-hmm.
cost double? Probably not. But there is some additional.
But so who are you going to go with, right? Like you're already in Google Drive. Like
Yeah.
it's sort of the what is it, the United Airlines unofficial slogan? What are you going to do? Rollerblade to Dallas? Shut up and get on the plane. Like get on and get off. Like those are your choices.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking from a corporate sense. I think this was a blend, if I remember reading correctly, of both personal and corporate users, right?
Hmm.
Did I read that correctly? Like this seems to be just like maybe a node or a shard failed.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So how these systems work, you were touching on this earlier, like global data centers. Google
Hmm.
obviously has that enterprise. I mean, they have 2 data centers. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I got two
Right.
data centers right down the road. Can you kind of educate our audience a little bit on sort of how these big cloud operations work with multiple data centers and saving data? Just
Yeah.
TLDR.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And again, this is not my super deep expertise anymore, but I'm going to go back and dig in the crates a little bit for this one. But, so you have basically, like you said, global data centers, and they're constantly replicating data back and forth. And because of load balancing and the traffic as it's sent to those data centers, it could be writing to different data centers at the same time. So
Mhm.
what this atomic clock does that Google has built is it does error checking and conflict resolution on those different data sets. So what really is marvelous about it is that it allows that if your data somehow takes two different routes, gets written in Singapore and in Cleveland, Ohio at the same time, it syncs back across milliseconds of time and chooses which is the proper data set and writes that to a specific portion in the database. And then that's sliced up into shards, like you were talking about, and distributed across the entire global infrastructure. And that's at a super high level, but that's
Yeah.
kind of how it works.
And so a lot of people, there's multiple things they're running right now. I think that those call. First of all, the
Mm-hmm.
cloud is not actually in a cloud. It's a bunch of computers spread across the planet. That's
Mm-hmm.
essentially in a nutshell what the cloud is.
Right.
But what I think some of the more technically aptitude people might have just learned right there is your data is not saved in any one place specifically. It might be spread out geographically across the globe, and
Yep.
Google pulls all these little bits and bytes of data together when you
Mm-hmm.
pull up the file on your screen. Like that's
Yep.
how this works. They are distributing across the globe. And as you can imagine, I mean, how many customers do you think Google has off the top of their head, like our data they might have? I assume the amount of data they're handling has got to be like in the exabytes, right? Like,
It's absolutely. Yeah.
like that's an insane operation that has very little room for failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's that like I said, the fact that this is the first time we've heard about this really happening is insane to me. I remember reading that in 2012 and being like, well, this isn't going to work. But
10 years
it's
later.
it certainly does, right? And the thing is not that it lost data; it's just that it reverted the data set, and they're still working on it. So
Yeah.
I tend to think they might actually be able to recover it. But I also wanted to make that point today too, is it could take some time because right now they're chasing a ghost in a machine in a labyrinth spider web of deduplicated databases
I'm imagining
spread
like
throughout the
Indiana
entire
Jones in
globe.
the server rack, like they got the hat
Yeah.
on, like, they're around this, they're like, hey, it's around here somewhere. We're gonna find it.
Yeah. So
No,
don't lose faith yet, I guess is what I'm saying.
I doubt, and it's not impossible. Like I have
Hmm.
unfortunately been the victim of a service where my business depended on, and the data shard was irrevocably lost. Right, like
Mm.
that does happen from time to
It
time,
does. Yeah.
unfortunately. But most of the time they can recover it. I think you touched on this though. It's the amount of time it takes to
Hmm.
recover it.
Hmm.
Do anyone who's in the business world right now watching this? Do you have data saved in the cloud in the last 6 months that you need to operate your business by accessing on a regular basis?
Right.
I'd say
Right.
95% of us. The answer is absolutely yes. I know it is for
Hmm.
me.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting exercise that I coach MSPs to do as they offer vCISO services, and I'm sure you're familiar with doing this as well. When we onboard a client to that type of advisory service, we go through what's called a crown jewels exercise, and we decide, hey, where's your most important data, and what systems is it stored on, and what is the RTO or the recovery time objective that we need for that data. If we didn't have that data in 24 hours, is it going to start causing material loss to our business?
Absolutely.
Thinking through all of that and then making sure that you have third party backups that are recoverable in that amount of time really prevents these kind of surprises and this kind of anger, right? If you've planned for that.
Absolutely. And let me make a quick shout out here because this I am the only promo sponsor for this show. If you'd like to talk about your backup strategy, if you'd like to figure out, hey, can I afford to lose 6 months of data and potentially for weeks at a time? And what exactly will happen? There's a
Yeah.
nice little QR code in the top left-hand corner. That is a free 15-minute, no obligation. You get 15 minutes of my or another cybersecurity engineer's time, where we will happily take you through any kind of mental exercise you want. Pick a time that works best for you and schedule today.
And as you heard, Rusty agrees.
Rusty. Okay, I was gonna work from home, but I moved all my stuff out to the garage every weekend, as I mentioned to you off camera. And I haven't finished insulating the garage. Where I'm at in Columbus
Nice.
right now, I woke up this morning, it was 18 degrees. So I said, yeah, I'm going in the office today. my
Well,
thermostat in the garage said it was 48, and I'm like, I'm not working in this. I'm out.
you get no sympathy from me. It was 4 degrees in Minnesota this morning.
Oh, but, um, I man, I think so. One of the things we've done, and I know there's a lot of controversy around this, but it's worked
Mhm.
well for us as an MSP. When our customers ask us this question, we do cloud to cloud backup just for these kind of scenarios, right?
Right.
Or of course, the big one everyone always talks about, ransomware. Like someone actually takes your data and you can't get it back, right? Like you need to have backups for a multitude of reasons.
Right.
But we've started making two. And we make not only a backup with a provider in the cloud, right? So if you're on Google, we'll make a copy of everything every night to an S3 bucket. That way it's in the cloud, ready to go.
Yeah.
But we particularly physically host our own equipment. So we have physical access to the data if need be, because that recovery time objective is always a key thing, depending on how much data you're backing up. And 6 months of data for a company of 100 people, that tends to be a decent chunk of data. Like getting a hold of that and putting it back in place is not a small task.
Well, not to mention the costs, right? So you're going to incur costs moving all that back out of S3 to all that large amount of data as well. And so I think that is best practice, and I completely agree with that strategy. I think it's the best of both worlds, right? Is
at the end of the world, physics trumps, right? If I can physically touch something and plug it into a computer, I have that much faster and more achievable time frame to get this back in place. Because,
absolutely,
I mean, I know businesses that can measure how much they lose in downtime per hour. Like they have it down to like the hour of how much money they're making and how much they're potentially losing. And so I think I was talking to a business not so long ago about 5 million a year in revenue, and they had figured out that for every hour they're down, they were losing about $1,834.
Yeah.
So if we can shave 2 hours off that backup recovery time, that's a $4,000 net gain towards you. Most people would say, I get behind that, right?
Yeah, I just actually put a post out on LinkedIn today about this. It's the FAIR model. There's 6 different types of losses in the FAIR analysis. It's a risk model. It's mainly for cybersecurity incidents, but it can work great for recovery time as well, because those kind of blend, right? Whether it's lost data from a ransomware attack or just because Google lost it, you're still in the same position. So thinking about those 6 types of things. Number one, your productivity loss. Can you ship goods and services and data, right? Your reputation loss, if that makes the news, or if competitors can use it against you. And there's several more. I'm trying to pull up the. I
was going to say, so I can get into the tactics, but I don't think the tactics are what's pertinent to this conversation. From like a philosophical, like a high level, talking to any kind of CEO, VP of IT, anyone who's thinking like, okay, my physical world and my digital world, they're intermarried. I think at this point, anybody who's really thinking about this will agree with that. Yeah. Disaster recovery. What is general things everyone should consider in a disaster recovery business continuity mindset? Like as putting your CISO hat on for a second.
Yeah, I mean, general things you need to consider is who has your data, where is it, and how long can you live without it? And you need to put that in different buckets. Stoplight. Start with a stoplight kind of model is red, yellow, green. So if we need certain data and we don't have it, like you said, for an hour, how much money are we losing? And then if we don't have it for a day, how much money are we losing? So if we say for a day is okay, or we can deal with it, 24 hours recovery time, that's kind of in your middle bucket. And then if we can deal with it without a week, that's kind of in that low recovery bucket. And start categorizing that. And knowing where your data is. I mean, I think that is the major problem that I still see in the programs that I go into, in the companies that I work with, is they just don't know where their data is.
They're trusting somebody else completely to tell them when the time comes.
Right. So we go back to that age-old like asset inventory, from a data perspective, of course. And so that's one of the major things I would start thinking about. And I want to fire these 6 terms off because I think it's helpful for, like you said, a CEO to think about productivity loss, the loss or the cost to respond to a loss, the replacement cost for the data. What if you have to recreate that data? What if you have a customer list that's been completely obliterated and you have to go back and actually talk to each one of your customers and get that data and put it back into your new CRM? That is a ridiculous amount of time and spend there.
Oh gosh, if I lost, so I'm on Go High Level. If I lost all the data in my CRM, like we're talking weeks and weeks of disruption. I'm talking personally, my business, right?
Yeah,
like the amount of data I have in my CRM just for the contact list alone, right? Who do I call about these things? That's gone.
I no longer have my stomach. It makes me a little sick to my stomach just thinking about it, right? And then there's the secondary stuff. There's the competitive advantage we talked about, fines and judgments if you're in a regulated industry, and with the new FTC rules, you very well could be. And then the reputation.
Too. Right. SEC too. That new SEC. For those of you who are on the show, I have worked with several companies that are publicly traded. The Form 8K rules kick into effect, I think, in T-minus 18 days.
Yeah.
Where if
Yeah.
you are any kind of incident material, you got to report it within 4 days, as well as a full
Yeah.
written public statement. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, 4 days.
Yeah.
Not having your data, that's usually considered material.
Well,
Just clear
that's
up for those who have legal hats on. Like, if you can't access your stuff to run business, there's not many lawyers or judges that wouldn't consider that material.
well, exactly. That's it. I mean, it's pretty much material at that point. Well, and this is you and I were talking about this right at the conference, and that's kind of how we got on this topic and got together. And I think why we resonated so well together about this topic.
So I'm going to put this out here. I'm going to take another second here to talk about this. For
Mm-hmm.
those of you who are thinking, man, I don't even know where to begin on this topic, that's fair. Like, I think most of us have in IT and cybersecurity have built our career based on the question, I don't even know where to begin, right? Like, so one of the things that my firm has done, and we do this as a freebie to show that we actually care about the business community. This isn't just a sales pitch to us.
Mm-hmm.
We wrote a quick 40-page book of general principles of cybersecurity and how to do basic business continuity, disaster recovery. This is not exhaustive, but it's a good place to start thinking about what areas maybe I need to consider. And it's written as much as possible in a DIY format. I'm going to post this on the screen here real quick.
Very cool.
There's a QR code that just showed up at the bottom of the screen for those of you who are watching the live stream or recording. Scan that QR code. Is a free ebook on cybersecurity essentials for a small business, anywhere from 10 to 100 employees usually, although it can be applicable all the way up to 2,000-3,000. Take a look at it. See if it can help you start charting out your future. If you're concerned about this, this is a great place to start. Again, QR codes in the description. For those of you listening on the podcast, you can go to cyber.tabernacle.tech/protect my business. Again, cyber.tabernacle.tech/protect my business. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and to boil that down a little bit, because I am someone who likes to boil things down and have them boiled down for me. I mean, three things come to mind when you ask about like where to start. Know where your data is, know how important that data is to your business, and have multiple copies of it in different spots. Those three things, if you do them, if you start there, you're going to be ahead of the curve at that point.
Did you say know what your data is or where your data is? Sorry.
Both.
I was going to say, I think both apply here. Like, you need to know what data you have too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Like, you need to know, and by what, I mean, we talked about that, rating exercise. Mm-hmm. So how critical is the data to your business?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've discovered as an MSP, it does cybersecurity. So for those of you, I don't think I talked about this too much. I'm a full MSP / what's called a managed security service provider as well, MSSP. So a lot of what we do is sort of risk assessment exercises, right? Mm-hmm. What do we need to know before we can make planning? Because until you know what you're planning for, how are you going to make a plan? So one of the things I consistently find with the SMB space and also with SME, like businesses of 300 plus, they're always shocked at how much data they have that they didn't know existed. Like things like personal identifiable information, addresses, days of birth, like that stuff is just everywhere. And a lot of businesses have no idea, why do we have this? Where did this come from? Like we're all kind of pack rats for this stuff without even realizing it. Like the downloads folder on a Windows computer is just chock full of goodies. Like that's what I found. Like go clean out your downloads folder. You probably eliminated about a third of your cyber risk when it comes to data. Like just clear that out. You don't need it.
Let's talk about a partner that I'm working with today who told me an incident they're dealing with that a person had 10 years of email in their inbox that was compromised. So
that goes into the data retention policy. There's two. We're talking a lot about data loss at this point. Like, what do we lose data? I think there needs to be don't hoard 20 years of data, guys. Yeah. It very rarely has any real business gains.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Is it more of a liability to you in your possession or not? And that goes back to, like you said, the what. And what data do we have?
So that segues into my next question for you. And I want you to put your CISO hat on again, because this one I don't know how to answer, and I'm hoping maybe you can give me some insight. The rules of data ownership seem to always be fluid in motion, but we're seeing a lot of movements on the compliance and regulatory space of trying to put attribution in place, right? Like someone owns the liability with this data.
Yeah.
Who is that person? And it does seem like a lot of times that's conflicting information depending on who you ask, what body, what state, whatever. Where do you think that conversation is going to end up, and who's going to end up holding where does the buck stop?
I don't know where it's going to end up. I'll tell you what I think.
Because Google is going to say our terms and conditions said this is not my problem, right?
Right.
Like that's exactly what they're going to fall on. But obviously, we've seen moves on the government level saying, wait a second, that seems a bit predatory.
Yeah, I think I don't personally think you're going to see a lot of change there, to be
Okay.
frank. I mean, these are we're talking about too big to fail, right? And if Google can get away from it, get away with it, I just don't see the government pushing the issue with that when there's so many other, I guess, lower hanging fruit that they could go after, like we see with the SEC. There's no real SEC for consumer data like that, and
Mhm.
so until we get some sort of global standard or global national standard for that, I don't see that really happening. Now, could we get a national standard? Yes, but things are complicated by what I think makes us so free in a way is states' rights, right? So you see that kind of fragmentation happening, and so
Also,
it's
the
yeah,
speed of innovation too. I think that's
yeah,
another problem that government struggles with because I mean, any kind of comprehensive framework government publishes is usually 5, 7 years in the making, and we seem to re-innovate how we do things every 5 years.
right.
Like how we do things in 2023 is completely different than how we did things in 2018.
So who owns the data? I mean, I guess we have to make a distinction there is B2B and B2C, right? So if this is B2B data or business to consumer data, it's a little bit different. And I think who owns the data in a B2B environment, right, is the system owners. So we go back to our old kind of like data categorization practices is the system owners own it. Now, do you have terms and conditions that you don't own it? Yes, but then you have that extra layer of different regulations, especially we see like life sciences and the SEC bringing complexities in there. So I think taking a pragmatic approach and doing and controlling what you can control as an organization, making sure you have system owners and step through markings of that data to make sure you're handling it properly is the best way to go about it, pragmatically at least.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I think, yeah, attribution is going to be the hardest part of this.
Hmm.
There is no one person that has sole ownership or responsibility in this equation. And like you said, states' rights are a big deal. Every state has its own data breach laws on the
Yeah,
books,
yeah.
their own requirements of what constitutes, a
Hmm.
violation of that. Like
Hmm.
you're in the compliance space. That's dealing with state stuff is sort of a rat's nest.
People are making businesses on breach notification
Yeah, based on what state you're in. I
services.
mean,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I actually know a lot of people who are in the tech space that do business out of Delaware, specifically because they have like courts that actually understand data law
Hmm.
governance. Like
Yeah.
they have a better shot of understanding that than normal state, municipality, or even federal government courts.
Yeah.
Like that, they purposely put their business there because they know there's no way they can terms and service their way out of liability. They at least
Right.
want a court that can have a conversant conversation if they
Right.
end up having to go down on the mat,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy that we're at that point and we're moving ever more into that kind of world where that's a real consideration. If you're in the data field, like a tech company,
Hmm.
you've got to make plans for that. I
Yeah.
think there's just no way
Well,
around
well, yeah, the whole data anonymization is going to be a big piece of that, right?
it.
So
Yeah,
we don't know what we have, we store it, and we can kind of have culpable deniability, right, of that. So yeah,
I yeah, there's just so much out there, and we could talk for hours about this. Like insurance comes into the equation, and neither of us are insurance experts, but I know for a
right,
fact that the insurance space itself is divided on how to deal with this,
yeah,
like for liability. Like, what do you do when you have legal liability for something in your realm business? Normally, you get an insurance policy. You have
right,
malpractice insurance. You got errors and
yeah,
omissions. Cyber, oh boy, have fun with that, guys.
yeah, right.
All right. Well, this is really good food for thought. Let's boil down as we wrap up today's call, sort
Hmm.
of what we can learn from the Google Drive incident specifically.
Yeah, yeah,
So, Google Drive, just to recap, lost 6 months worth of data for a chunk of its users. It wasn't insignificant. Obviously, caused a lot of pain based on the forums I'm reading. So, prevention. What kind of things you think should anyone listening to the show start thinking about to keep that from happening to them?
yeah. I think you mentioned local backups. I mean, I think that's a good way that could have, if someone was copying to a NAS at their house and copying up to the Google Cloud, they would have avoided this. Barring that, just some sort of redundant storage, whether it's another cloud service or yeah, it's a way to have your data in two places. That's bottom
Copy and
line.
paste it to a hard drive. We don't care.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
Don't,
I
don't
mean,
say that. We do care. We do care. Bad Logan.
I mean, it's the same thing if people say, oh, these people writing their passwords down in password books. I'm like, it's safer than using the same password everywhere. So it's kind of like, I don't recommend doing that, but it's better than using the same password everywhere. It's kind of
I
the same
knew a
thing,
guy who kept all
right?
his passwords in a notebook in a locked drawer by his desk, and I'm like, honestly, that's better than 95% of the security methods out there. Like,
Right, right.
fair, right? Like, okay.
Yeah. Rest in peace, your comments.
A lot of MSPs watch this show. This is not going to go well for them. All right, guys. I'm Logan Evans, CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions. Jesse, go ahead and introduce yourself one last time.
Yeah, Jesse Miller with Power PSA. We help MSPs build their security services for scale, and we do it profitably.
And Jesse, if someone wants to get a hold of you, right, say they're an MSP watching the show or just wanting to shoot the breeze, maybe someone in a similar field, how would they do that?
Oh, you can do one of two things. You can go to powerpsa.com, which is my website, and hit the chat button, or head over to LinkedIn. I'm super active there, and shoot me a DM. My profile is /SecOps Warrior, SECOPS, Warrior as in sword.
You got to get like a sword for your profile picture next. That'd be really great. I love that. I'm a big sword guy. Forged in Fire is my favorite show of all time.
Oh, it's a great show.
That's a little typical. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching the Binary Business Show. Until next time, stay safe out there. And honestly, be a little paranoid at this point when it comes to your data. Like that's the moral we're walking away with.
Yeah.
Till then.